Well, we made it back from Norm's yesterday. It was a long day. Left here at 4:30 in the morning. I didn't get back until about 10 o'clock that night, so it was a lot of road time. But we got some good Christmas presents. Is this the most beautiful thing you guys have ever seen, or what? So this is the steering box for my 612, and it is completely made new from scratch. There's nothing original on this box. Every part of it had to be reproduced because I didn't have any of it. So Norm was gracious enough to take apart the steering box on his 612 and use all the original castings to go to the foundry and get new castings made and completely machine them all from scratch. And there was a big round and round to get all the appropriate gears made for this thing. Unfortunately, Norm has it. Not unfortunately. Unfortunately, you can't see the inside of this because Norm has it all siliconed up, final assembled. Basically, it's ready to paint and put on the tractor. So I can't actually show you the internals of it, unfortunately. I'll try to round up a few pictures and put them here so you can see what the gears look like. But the end of this shaft is where your steering shaft from your steering wheel comes to. There's a bell-shaped piece that goes on here, and I have that. So this turns, and inside here there's a worm gear and turns it 90 degrees to go down, and this engages on the big horseshoe shaped piece on the top of the differential, so you can get a peek of the worm gear in there. You can't see much through that hole either, but it is beautiful. I am so happy to have this part of the project done, and hopefully fingers crossed, we'll go and once we get it back to Kenmare, we'll put it on the tractor to dry fit it, and hopefully everything bolts up and meshes with the gear perfectly, and this will be pretty much done except for paint. So the gears, back to my point of my story, the gears, it was hard to find a source to get them made because the worm gear and the gear that meshes up against it are a oddball thread size and pitch and everything. So finding a company that could do that was very hard. We actually ended up, my friend David Dickmeyer found a source from an Amish machine shop out east that could do these. So he got them done there, of all places, at an Amish machine shop. So that makes it even more impressive. It's kind of interesting, they can't have electricity in their house, obviously, but in that particular group, they're allowed to have I believe it's a diesel generator, if I understand the story correct, to power the machinery in their workshop to run all their CNC equipment. So that's kind of neat. But like I said, I seen these gears before it was put together, and they're beautiful. Those worm gears are just perfect. I mean, how they do all that is just amazing to me. I would love to see that process. So that is, like I said, just beautiful. It all came together just perfect. There's just a itty bitty backsplash in there in the gears like they should be. So this should be about the smoothest steering 612 there is out there. This shaft is where the two rods for your control linkages go on, the arms. I'll show you all that when we get out there and install it. That's what that pin is for. So yeah, another big thank you to Norm. Very much appreciated for going above and beyond to help me with that project. I don't know what I would have done otherwise. It would have been hard. But yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful piece of iron there. And it's made out of better casting than what originally they were made out of. It's malleable cast. So it's a lot stronger than what the original parts are. So this should never break again. You know, it should last as long as I'll ever care. And one thing we did upgrade different than original. So this sits. This is the top of it right here. So that, you know, the gear points straight down. So this is the bottom of it. Originally, there would be oil in here to lubricate your gears. Most people these days in theirs, they run some type of thin grease because the oil would leak out because of, you know, being worn and whatever. Well, this one being new, all the tolerances are perfectly tight. This actually should hold oil, and we went one step further, and Norm machined in a modern lip seal to ride on this shaft so the oil doesn't leak out and dribble out, you know, and make a mess here on the nice paint job. So that's one deviation from factory normal, but that's okay with me because you'll never really see it anyway. It's hidden up underneath, and once it's all painted, you'll never know that. And I'd rather have that deviate from factory and have it not leak oil than keep it factory and leak oil. So this one, we'll actually be able to put oil in this when it's all said and done and installed. And it should, fingers crossed, it should hold oil and not leak. So that's really amazing. That's awesome. So we also got back clutch part. So this is the new ramped disc I've been talking about that Norm had cast for me as well. A couple of clutch friction disc materials that we'll have to cut down the right ID, but we have to cut them down the appropriate OD. But so this goes into the flywheel here, and I'll show more of this once we get further into the clutch. But just for now, you know, one friction material, the driven disc, which is at Norm's, to get a new one of them cast. To instead of fabricating one, we're going to look into getting one cast off of mine original as a pattern. So we'll cross that bridge when that gets further along. But the second one, and then this goes on top of all of that. And there is 3 pins that go in these holes and into these notches to keep this centered and located so it does not spin. You know, that goes with the flywheel, and then your adjustments work off of those 3 ramps. Again, I'll show more of that once I get further along into the clutch stuff. I do have these pins. I think they're actually in the house at the moment, so I can't show you them at the moment, but I'll show you them later. So that's another partial check off the list. We got some more clutch work to do, but having this ramped disc, that's one important part. We do have another baffle. This was out of the second engine, which I'll get to in a second here. But we got the option now. We could either fix the original baffle or replace it with this baffle. So we've got options there to go in the oil pan. We have an engine. Ta-da! I took the little valve side covers off, lifter covers, whatever you want to call it here, and was looking at things in there. Everything looks nice. A little dark in the garage here, I apologize. So Norm basically did everything we couldn't do ourselves with this engine, and I'll take it from here. So he did all of the machine work, and he got all of the bearings fit, and knew, checked all the sizes of everything as far as everything being within tolerances, and it was on this engine. But we put in new piston rings, of course, and we went with all new valves because I had half of them anyway. We put new valve guides in. So basically, this is a brand new engine for all intents and purposes. He had to. Oh, okay, I'm gonna back up here. So this is not the block that came with the tractor. This is a block for another Leroy power unit engine. We've talked in the past how the Allis blocks are slightly different than the power unit blocks. The really only difference there is the way the flange looks on the back of the block casting. The Allis blocks, the flange is taller on the back here to go up to. These are the original mounting holes for the Allis block. So this back flange would be arced up like that. The power unit blocks, they're just a little bit smaller. So we can adapt them and make them work by just modifying the holes to this plate. This plate bolts to the main casting of the tractor. And we can modify that, and it works just fine. There's other Allis 612s out there with the same situation, the same adapted block, because finding Allis Leroy blocks is obviously impossible. So this is the next best solution to that issue. But everything else will be original. This is original. The oil pan is original. The front cover is original. So the only thing not Allis is the actual block, and that's only because I didn't have the original Allis block. It did not come with my tractor. Somewhere in history, it was, I don't know, if it was broken and somebody found that Leroy block that I had gotten as a replacement is the best I can speculate at this point. So the block that I had got with the tractor, I'll try to keep this short and brief, but give you a background story on it. The block that I had gotten with the tractor, the power unit engine, it ended up being, long story short, it ended up being not cost effective to fix. There was a lot of issues with the valve seats and the sleeves. There was at least one sleeve that would have needed to get bored and sleeved because there's a lot of pitting, corrosion. And the way this block is designed, sleeving them is less than ideal because there's so little meat there that you run into issues with strength with the head bolts then, because you're taking away so much of the material if you bore it out and sleeve it. And then, like I said, the valve seats were bad in the other block. So they could have welded them up and fixed it, but by the time you do all that, you're getting a lot of money invested into a marginal block at best. And there was some cracks and issues, and it could be saved, but it wasn't really worth the effort. So I did some asking around, and my friend David Dickmeyer found one of these out east for himself at a salvage yard or whatever. And when he found the one for him, that place actually had two of them. So he bought the one for himself to fix his tractor. And so I basically had him go back and get the second block engine. But he bought that for me. So that's what this engine you're seeing is. Basically, we used most of that engine instead of the parts that came with my tractor, because this engine was in very good condition. There is very little runtime on this engine. So it was set up, as best we can tell, like a winch engine for like a logging outfit, because it had a big belt pulley out front of the engine, that we speculated was hooked up to like a cable winch for pulling logs or something around. So Norm actually had to modify the front of the crankshaft here. This was actually a tapered fit on it originally because it had like a Lovejoy coupler to hook to the belt pulley that was on here. So we took that off. He turned this down to like it would be on an Allis tractor. So the original crank, I don't know what you call it, claw is on the front. And then the pulley for your fan blade or belt goes on the front of there, which brings us to another issue. So this is the one that I had that came with it or whatever. Well, then we realized here just the other day, well, this is different than an Allis pulley. An Allis pulley is considerably bigger. It's, about that big, and it actually has a little lip on the back edge to keep the belt from walking off the pulley or whatever. So Norm is going to take one of his originals and again use it as a pattern to cast me in a correct lower pulley. So that'll fix that problem. And then once we get that, he'll machine it so we can put that on instead of this one. So another, just one more hurdle to cross. What else am I forgetting to cover here? So basically, like I said, this engine was in very good condition. Like I said, it probably was like a backup one or something. It didn't have hardly any hours on it because it's essentially like brand new. Everything was within tolerances. It wasn't even stuck or anything. It was still loose. So I cleaned it all up, checked everything, and everything was good. So we're running with it. Basically just freshened it up. Like I said, the new valves and guides and that stuff, just because we could, just because I had them. The valves that were in it probably would have, you could have gave them a light cleanup and those would have been just fine too. But as long as I had half the new valves, we got the rest of them and just went down that road. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. Norm went through and fixed the oil pump here. So that should be good to go. There's new little check balls in there. And he made this little adapter so I can put the original little, there's basically a little bleeder here so you can crack it open to see, make sure you have oil pressure. And then this end goes down to there is a copper line that goes from that down to your intake or in your oil pan, your oil level gauge, and then your intake screen going to the oil pan, so that connects them. We got little primer cups to put in the head. Those are currently out so they don't get damaged. I guess there was 3 good ones that came with that engine, fortunately, and Norm rounded up a 4th for me. So there again, thanks to Norm. We will have to come up with some there's supposed to be these little covers to keep them clean or whatever when they're not being used. Only one of them had that, so we'll probably end up reproducing some of them. I think those are actually available, but we might try making some just for fun. It's just a flat stamped piece of tin, so it's nothing terribly hard to reproduce. And figure out the process to re-rivet or pin them on, however those are attached. So that's good. We got some miscellaneous bolts here. This is the fitting that was on the side here to this is to go to your lower port on your radiator. So that can get cleaned up and then that'll go on there. Speaking of radiators, I talked to the radiator guy here this morning, and it's not going to be done by when I'm home here over the holidays, so we'll have to, again, cross that bridge when we get there. Whenever we're done with it, we'll have to figure out how to get it out to my place. That's okay, I'm a ways away from needing it anyway. We will have to eventually make up a little mushroom-shaped breather cap to go on this pipe, because that was missing and I don't have one. It didn't come with the tractor. So we might, now that we're playing around with metal forming and stamping with the air cleaner stuff, we might try getting a template from somebody that has an original one to find that correct shape for that mushroom and make up a die and maybe try making that too someday here. So that's all the good stuff. A lot of good news. Everything looks good. A little bit of the bad news, and it's not even terrible news, but Dad and I are gonna look at this afternoon here, is to try to figure out some fitment issues with these castings. We had the oil pan over there on here at Norm's, and of course, because we're mixing and matching non-original blocks with original pan and original backer plate, of course things aren't quite perfectly lining up. The biggest issue we were having was if you line up all the side bolt holes, this front casting between the engine block and the oil pan front were not coming out flush. It'd be flush like on this side, and it was actually a little bit low on this side. So we're going to look at that a little bit more and see what we can do to, solve that issue, as far as if we can align things a little bit better, or if we're actually going to have to look at doing some light touch-up machining to get surfaces more true, or what. We're not quite sure what the solution is yet at this point. But yeah, we should be able to figure something out. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more videos to come of me going through and doing final assembly and stuff on this engine. So you'll see a lot more, and I'll explain a lot more as we go. I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of what we had here and what we're dealing with and where we are at this point. I'm just tickled pink to have it back and be able to continue on with this now, because I was almost getting to a point where I was kind of waiting on the engine here. So I got the nice tag on this block. Leroy model, I don't know if you can see it on here. It says Model 2C, and then the number 213, what is that? 83, I think it says. So that's kind of neat to have that on there. Polish that up a little bit. And then yeah, Norm's got it pretty well cleaned up. So once we get everything, oil pen on and front cover on and whatnot, I'll give it one quick final cleanup, and this will be pretty much ready for primer and paint then. So that'll be good. Speaking of the front cover, that is still down at Midwest Cylinder Head. There again, they weren't going to have it done by the holidays, so they'll end up having to just ship it back to my place in North Dakota when they're done with it. And I'll have to make sure, check all the fitment and stuff on that once it gets back. But for now, if we can just get this surface and the front of the oil pan surface to come out flat and true, because that front cover casting is going to fit up to that, so it needs to be flat and true. And if we can get everything else to line up with everything else and make sure all the bolt holes for everything line up, we should be good. Going back to this here, I'm not sure 100% yet what I'll do, if anything, but one thought I had was, since the original flange comes up higher like that, is I considered basically making a filler piece to bolt from the back using the original bolt holes, just so from the outside it cosmetically looks like the original block, and plug off these original holes. Whether or not I'll do that yet, I'm not really sure, but I might tackle that. Basically just cut out whatever that is, a 1/2-inch piece of steel to that shape, fit it to that block, and with the original profile on the outside, just so cosmetically it kind of looks correct. I don't know. We'll see if I actually do that or not. But yeah, it's coming out good. I'm happy with things. Because yeah, once this is back on, the tractor, then we can start doing a lot of other things. We can start fitting manifolds and brackets for magnetos. And speaking of magnetos, Matt finally got some parts he was waiting on for my magneto, so he can move along with that project too. So I would imagine it wouldn't be too terribly much longer, and he'll be done with that and can send that to me. Probably have him make up some plug wires for me as well at that point. Ship them all out at the same time, and then we can fit up routing the plug wires, and we can start working on the exhaust then, because the exhaust comes up, and figure out that's mainly made out of black pipe fittings actually, so we can make all that up from scratch, because none of that came with the tractor. So yeah, lots of cool stuff happening here now. So stay tuned. We'll be really getting into some stuff here in the next few weeks. I guess we'll kind of the clutch will probably actually be one of the next things to really worry about though, because I can't put the engine into the tractor until the clutch situation is 100% figured out, because you got to put the clutch into the flywheel, put the flywheel onto the engine, put the clutch into the flywheel, and put the whole assembly onto the tractor. If that makes sense. So yeah, but we're gonna monkey with this the next few days, and then we'll load it into my truck, and I'll bring it back to North Dakota this coming weekend, and then I should have 99% of the tractor out there at my place to work on. So yeah. Alrighty, everybody, thanks for watching. Be sure to look if you're subscribed or not. If not, please consider subscribing. It's free. Why wouldn't you? And hit the old like button if you like what you see. And we will see you maybe next week.